there, Amanda Hannon here talking to you today about a very important historical event that is scheduled to take place this week. Friday marks the 58th inauguration ceremony for this great country. This event has changed many times over the years, but one thing that we know for sure is that it is a long-standing tradition for the United States. So let's talk about some of the events that take place on Inauguration Day. We're going to start with the very first event that's on the agenda, which is the Inauguration Worship Service. In 1933, FDR set the tradition of attending the worship service prior to the inaugural address. The second event that we have on the docket is going to be the procession to the Capitol. Rutherford B. Hayes gave us the tradition of accompanying the outgoing president to the procession. The next event that we have is the Vice President swearing in. And there's a couple of interesting facts about this particular event. First of all, in 1937, the VP swearing in was moved from the Senate chamber to the east front side of the Capitol, and it found its final resting place in 1981 on the west front of the Capitol. And there is an image of the west front right there. Another important thing that we want to make note of in 1937, the date of the inauguration changed. Back then it was March the 4th, and it moved to January the 20th in 1937. The next event that we're going to talk about is the President swearing in. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan was actually the one who moved the swearing in from the east front to the west front, and he did that for two reasons. The first reason is it was a better location for spectators. They had better visibility. And number two, it lowered construction cost. The next event that we have is the inaugural address, and I know everybody's really familiar with this one. This particular slide is from 1841, and it is a depiction of President William Henry Harrison, who delivered the longest speech in inaugural history, clocking in at 8,445 words. So if you can see in this image, there's a lot of umbrellas and that kind of thing going on in the background from the spectators. It was a really cold and rainy day that day. And unfortunately, as a result, 1 month later, President Harrison died from pneumonia. It is said that it was a result of prolonged exposure to the elements. Also, some informative facts that we want to note about the inaugural address is that in 1921, President Warren G. Harding gave the first inaugural address through a loudspeaker. In 1925, President Coolidge was the first to give a nationally broadcasted inaugural address on the radio. And in 1949, President Harry Truman gave the first nationally televised inaugural address. The next event that we have is the departure of the outgoing president. This is typically, the departure is typically done by way of helicopter, so the former First Lady and the former President will usually leave before the luncheon by way of helicopter. And that tradition was set in 1977 by President Ford. The next event we have is the inaugural luncheon. This luncheon is historically prepared by the outgoing First Lady and President, and this tradition has been around since 1897 when President McKinley was here, but has changed many times over the years. In 1953, the JCCIC began to get more involved in doing the preparation, and that is still the case today. Next up, another one that you guys may be familiar with is the inaugural parade. This is another event that's been around since President Washington in 1789, but in 1809, James Madison was the first president to actually organize a parade. And another fun fact to know is that in 1921, President Harding was the very first president to ride in the parade in an automobile. And you have an image of that right here. The last event on the agenda is the inaugural ball. This event has been around since President Madison in 1809, and in 1921, President Warren G. Harding actually requested that this particular event be canceled. He was trying to pinch pennies and save a little money, so he requested that it be canceled. They did have it, but it was on a much smaller scale than what we know today. In 1949, President Harry Truman brought the ball back to its former glory. And something else that might be interesting to you guys is that President-elect Trump has 3 inaugural balls on his schedule. So this particular inauguration has gotten a lot of media coverage. It's kind of raised some eyebrows from a lot of people that maybe wouldn't be normally interested in a president election. So I'm going to leave you guys with some final thoughts. Our country has been built on traditions that pay tribute to patriotism and a sense of celebration for this important transfer of power from one president to the other. There have been protests and outcries from citizens all around the United States about this particular inauguration. This country is built on the idea of fairness to all and pays tribute to the spirit of democracy. We have to remember that even though there's some that may not be happy about the choices that were made in last year's election, the 45th President of the United States will be inaugurated as a result of the voices that went to the polls and cast their votes for who they deemed was an acceptable president for this country. I pray that the events of Friday's inauguration will be peaceful and a time to celebrate the ideas and beliefs that this country was founded on. I will leave you with a final quote from Abraham Lincoln. America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we've destroyed ourselves. Thank you for listening.